Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I am the Mocktor. I'm not a doctor, no credentials, no education, just 53 years of life experience and a PhD in keeping it real. So as the Mocktor, let's diagnose today's dysfunction. So this is actually a part 2 to an earlier episode that I had done on DNA reveals and or DNA test reveals. The last video that I did was about my husband, or it wasn't about my husband, but I used him as an example. When you find out something in your DNA that you didn't want, and in part 1 it was about my husband, finding out that, all these years he'd thought he was Hawaiian, and he, didn't have his dad growing up, and so he really loved that race his whole life, or that just he loved the fact that he was Hawaiian because it was the only thing he had of his dad. And then in his mid-50s, he found out that he was not Hawaiian, that he was Filipino, and it was very devastating for him. So you got to go back and watch that video. It's a great video. But this one here is about like a DNA identity shock. And let's look at the chart here. So I've got my talking points always above you, so sometimes you'll see my eyes roaming around the screen to keep on track, because I do digress. So it says here that DNA-induced identity shock can cause symptoms of confusion, grief you cannot quite name, sudden family math, that's kind of a funny one, questioning everything you thought you knew, and Googling family trees until 2 in the morning. That could also be one of the symptoms. So people think DNA tests are just about curiosity. And a lot of times people venture on that quest with that same idea of the fact that you're curious about who you are. But for some folks, it turns into a grief bomb. It turns into, you didn't just learn information, you lost certainty. So DNA sometimes changes your story, and your nervous system reacts, and sometimes it takes a while for your brain to catch up. So this is not a plot twist. This is a nervous system reset. So the shock becomes, who am I? So it just depends on, there's a situation, it could be 20 things. You find out your parents aren't your parents. You always knew that you had a parent out there, and then you find them and then they don't want you, or your daughter finally comes looking for her brother but doesn't have anything to do with you as the father. There are so many things that happen here. I have a couple of situations that are kind of people that I know, and I have somebody who reached out to me and says, I think you're my first cousin. In fact, I've had that happen to me twice. I've had one on my mom's side and one on my dad's side. The one on my mom's side, all her life she knew that her dad wasn't her dad, or I don't know that she had a dad, she just had a mom. I'm not sure how that situation worked out. But she knew she had a biological father out there that she was very curious about. And so just imagine, you all your life, that your dad is out there from the time you're a little girl, and you're romanticizing this knight in shining armor, this wonderful human being, and you just can't wait to meet your daddy. And you're just so in love with this idea of who's your dad. And then you wait all these years and you become a grown-up, and you do the research, and you finally maybe it takes some nerve for you to get up the courage to do this DNA test, because you're so afraid of the rejection, maybe, So you do everything you have to do to get up the nerve, and you get it done, and you find out, and you find people, and you start searching, okay, who are some names? And I don't know how long it took her, but she ended up reaching out to me and to another cousin. We both got emails in the DNA app, and this happened to be an uncle that also was given up for adoption. So we knew who he was. Because he was given up to a family member. So we still kind of had some contact with him, but he didn't grow up as my mom's brother, even though it was my mom's biological brother. And we made the connection of who it was. And when we finally were able to get a hold of this uncle, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He had a wife who was sick and who's ill, and he was concerned about her health and what it might do to her. So he didn't want to bring it up. And when I tell you that, I mean, think about the backstory that I just said. You're thinking of your dad and this wonderful man, and you've been waiting for him to come and, rescue you from a life without having a father, and you get up the nerve and he doesn't want to have anything to do with you. I mean, that is just soul crushing. Soul crushing. And it's really interesting. She just reached out to me not very long ago, and she was, just basically saying, hey, I hope he's fine. But let's get you and I get together. So we've talked, over the years, but I think we're going to finally meet. So that's one scenario where you are looking for your dad, and then you find out after all these years that he just didn't want you. And that is very, very, very painful. I also have another cousin on another side who reached out to me. Met her probably on Facebook about maybe 5 years ago or so. Same kind of scenario. Hey, it says you're my first cousin. Do you know so-and-so? And I was like, yeah, that's my uncle. It's my dad's brother. And so she asked all kinds of questions, and, we talked on into the night, and come to find out she only wanted to meet her brother. And my uncle found out that she didn't want to meet him, and it was crushing to him. He had been in a situation with a girl who her parents didn't want. This is when he was much younger. And her parents didn't want him around. And so they hid her, whereabouts and all this stuff. And he loved this little girl. He loved this little girl. In fact, sometimes he still asks, hey, does so-and-so ever ask for me? And I don't have the heart to say she doesn't want anything. Well, she does know that she was only really interested in talking to his son, her brother. But he doesn't know how, kind of brutal she was about it, and I just don't have the heart to say it. So I don't know if, he's still holding out hope, but it's a long life of wonder, and you put all this hope and this possibility of a person, finally meeting you and finally finding you, only to find out they don't want anything to do with you. So it's another loss. It's a loss again. And I'll tell you, I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with this, but if you have, I would love you to share your experience here. If you want to, maybe there's somebody else who may have the same scenario as you, who might benefit from your understanding. Because what happens is we have family who it doesn't happen to them, and they're like, you were so loved, we loved you so much, you'll be fine. They minimize it because they don't really they never felt the hole that you had. They didn't feel it. They don't feel your hole. They've always just seen you as you're a happy child in this home. You know, we've been so loving. She's fine. We have given her everything. We've made sure she didn't want for anything. And they don't know that in the back of your head, you've been missing something. But because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, you don't talk about it. Or maybe you've brought it up and it was met with, oh, you're fine. And it's been minimized. That can be very, very, very difficult. Very, very, very difficult. So there's that. There's the identity thing. You know, who am I? You know, where do I come from? How come everyone knew about this except for me? So depending on the scenario, whether you found out your parents weren't your parents, or whether you found out you have a sibling out there, now you're wondering, why does my dad have a sibling out there that's younger than me? Or maybe he didn't know he had he had a child out there. There's just so many scenarios, but the point of this is it can open wounds, or it can reopen wounds depending on whether you knew about this or not. And so this is a big, 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 big deal. The loss to many people is invisible to them, but it's not to you. So just if you're someone listening who has a child and they found out that they have a father, you know, be patient with them, because this really is painful. You know, they didn't just lose a person. They also now lost a possibility if it's not reciprocated. You know, and in the case where someone does find joy in the fact that they have a sibling, you know, you may have expectations. You may have expectations of how quick the bonding period is going to take, and you may be so excited to meet this family member. I have an aunt. She's 80 years old. All her life, she didn't have her dad in her life. And she did the same thing. She romanticized, I want to get in touch with my dad's family. And, you know, her generation is older. And so there's not a lot of people on Ancestry. You know, they aren't doing all that. They don't know how to work the apps. They don't know how to do that. So I had to do a lot of digging on Facebook for last names in certain cities during certain years, and I finally found somebody, and she was so thrilled to find out she didn't, you know, obviously she's 80, so her dad is now deceased, and she had expected that. But she has a way younger sister who is like 60 something. So she's got a sister who's like 25 years younger than her. And she's waited all her life since she was a little girl. And since I can remember, she's talked about finding her family. And their sister kind of was very, oh, this is cool information, you know. But she's finding out for the first time, the sister. And she's only had 1 hour in this phone call, and didn't develop all of the fantasy. And, you know, my aunt just really, really romanticized what this reunion would be like. And she was so disappointed because the sister was like, hey, you know, glad to know you exist. This is cool. I didn't know Dad had any other kids out there. And because that one sister is the only link to her father, she wanted that so bad and didn't get it. And it really, 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 really hurt her. It made her cry. So if you're going to venture out on these, you know, looking for family, I encourage you to do it if that's what you want to do. But be realistic about what could possibly happen. Be realistic about the fact that you may not be received, or you may have to be kept a secret, or someone's not going to feel about you and meeting you the way you feel about meeting them. Don't have any expectations at all. Some people do these DNA tests to look for people. Some people just do these DNA tests because they want to find out what ethnicity they are or where their people are all from. And then they find out something that they didn't intend to find. So either way, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect ourselves because we don't know what we're going to find. Thankfully, I didn't find anything out too wild for myself. But like I said, my husband did. And it was really, really, really hard on him. And if you're someone who knows of a person that is just finding out this information, here's what not to say, okay? At least you know now. Blood doesn't matter. Everything happens for a reason. And you should be grateful. Instead, say, that's a lot to process. I'm here. You don't have to explain. Take the time you need. Those are the things that we need to say. Because this is big for that person. This is a person's whole identity. A lot of times people end up with a whole blank page all their lives. And they go searching for their story in their parent. And when they don't get to have the story, it's like losing that parent twice. And the last thing we want to do is, you should be grateful. I mean, we don't want to tell anybody what they should be in a situation like this. This is deep, deep, deep stuff here. So if this is something that's happened to you, just remember healing isn't linear. It's a process. Some days you're going to be good. Some days you're going to be feel pain out of nowhere. You're going to get hit with it. Anniversaries, holidays, medical forms, they all trigger stuff. So you don't have to rush to forgive. And you can feel angry, But what I want you to remember is that anger is just a doorway. It's not a house, and you'll probably hear me say that more than once. Do not stay in anger because that is counterproductive, and it does induce healing when you take the time you need to be angry, but to stay there makes it worse. But do take your time with a plan to move forward with the anger, and with a plan to get over the anger and find the next way of processing for yourself. So, yeah. Healing isn't about making it make sense. It's about making it survivable, where you can move on and still live your life and find happiness in your life and not let this one thing define you. It's a big thing, but lots of other things define you. Parenthood, being friends, having siblings, having your circle, having your hobbies, having the things you love. Those are all things that define you. And also that missing family member, is part of you. But if you can't get it, don't dwell there. Don't dwell there. Make sure that you have and I find journaling, there's some good self-help books out there that you can read online. Do journaling. I love to journal. I love to write my feelings down. I find that to be very, very, very helpful. get out, get some sun, exercise, do all those kind of things. Yeah, these DNA tests, they don't come with emotional warning labels. You know, just ask yourself what you're hoping for, and support matters. Don't do it alone. If you are venturing out on something you already know might be there, have some support. So if your story changed, you're not broken, you're adjusting. You're allowed to grieve what you thought you knew. DNA decides biology, but you decide meaning. So that's still, you own that still. So you get to own how you proceed from here. That's still yours. You own that. So that is a very good position to be in. That's great positioning for healing. You know, yeah, it may not work out the way you want, but you move forward and you get to decide how you move forward. So I'm the Mocktor, not a real doctor, but I am here to tell you your reaction makes sense. So please tell me if you've been through anything like this. And, you know, I'm not allowed to write prescriptions for medication, but I am prescribing for you to, one, make sure you have some support. Make sure you talk yourself through what could possibly happen. And if you know somebody who's been through something like this, be gentle. Don't assume that they should be okay and just let this bounce right off of them. Be supportive. And if they want to talk about it, let them talk about it. But if they don't want to explain, they don't have to. It doesn't matter. It could be your closest relationship, could be mother or child. They don't owe you anything, but you owe them some respect and some tenderness during this time. So, yeah, let me know what you think about this episode, or if you know of a situation like this. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you want to talk about next. These are, you know, I've got a lot of topics that I have ideas about, and I don't know if I'm on the right track or not. But if you guys got something that you feel you want to discuss, please let me know. I'm the Mocktor, not a real doctor, real talk. See you for your next appointment.